بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Inshallah, today I wanted to actually reflect on a verse in a different surah, and this is Surah Taqabur. It's something that the tafsir of this verse was something that was very striking. I think for me this week, I teach a weekly tafsir class, alhamdulillah, and so this verse was really an important lesson. And I wanted an opportunity actually to expand more on just one statement, one comment mentioned by one mufassir on a clause of this verse. And it's in Surah Taqabur, verse 11. ما أصاب من مصيبة إلا بإذن الله وما يؤمن بالله يهدي قلبه والله بكل شيء عليم. So that's the entirety of the verse, that whatever befalls a person from a musibah, from an affliction, it is only by the permission of God. And that whoever believes in Allah, then Allah guides their heart, and Allah is over all things knowing. So this is the verse. The clause that I want us to look at is وَمَن يُؤْمِن بِاللَّهِ يَهْدِي قَلْبَهُ, right? So whoever believes in Allah, then Allah guides their heart. Now, in the tafsir of what guidance means in this context, I was expecting to read different comments, different tafsir. I thought that guidance is going to talk about people who they're guided because they do all of the acts of obedience and they stay away from all of the acts of disobedience. And while that's included in what was mentioned, something else was mentioned as sort of like the primary running theme about what guidance means in this context. And subhanAllah, we can never take, even, clauses of the Quran are repeated a number of times, but depending on the verse and depending on the context of those verses, it includes different shades of meaning. So in this particular clause, وَمَن يُؤْمِن بِاللَّهِ يَهْدِي قَلْبَهُ, because what comes before it is about whoever is afflicted with a difficulty, then it is only by the permission of God. So now the meanings that arrive from this clause right after it are going to be affected by what comes before. And so Imam Ibn Ajiba, he says that Allah guides his heart means that Allah guides the heart to contentment and surrender with the divine decree. That's what guidance of the heart means. It's surrender and contentment with that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decreed upon us, which has already befallen. And he also says that because he includes many meanings, and he says it's the realization of returning to Allah, that these are people who would say or believe in a time of difficulty, right? Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un, that truly to Allah we belong and to Him we return. So the guidance of the heart here is again going back to a theme of contentment and surrender and acceptance of that which comes to us from God. We know that these are words that we would say in a time of tragedy, right? In a time of difficulty, when we lose a loved one, these are the words that we say. So again, here the guidance of the heart is that acceptance of what God has allowed to occur towards us in the world itself. Mujahid, who is a mufassir from the Tabi'een, he said something that I think this is what's going to be kind of our focus, inshallah, for today. He said about this verse that the guidance of the heart means if they are tested, they are patient. And if they are given, they are grateful. And if they are transgressed, they forgive. That's what the guidance of the heart is. And so we're going to reflect on each piece, that if they are tested, they are patient. And if they are given and they are blessed by something that they enjoy, then they're grateful. And then if they are transgressed, they're able to forgive, or that they forgive. This also, each one of these parts is connected to contentment and acceptance of the divine decree. Ibn Atiyah, who's a mufassir and a Maliki scholar, and who was a judge in Andalusia, he was also a mufassir. He said, the one That Allah guides their heart means the one who acknowledges and recognizes the divine decree, then their trials are made easier for them and lighter for them. So the guidance of the heart is, again, connected to acceptance. It's connected to contentment with God Himself. And then their difficulties and what they're going through is not as bad. And there's a burden that's lifted because, an aspect of the burden that's lifted because their hearts were able to get to this point. And so contentment and acceptance and loving surrender, as we kind of talked about earlier, it's connected to patience itself. So one of the things that Imam Ibn Ajiba talks about when he talks about contentment and submission, in Arabic it's al-rida wa taslim, he says that for both contentment and submission, the beginning is patience. The beginning of contentment and loving surrender is patience and spiritual effort. So what this means is that something happens that is hard for us. Maybe we don't like it. Maybe it's not easy. And in order to practice our faith in a way that's pleasing to God, in that, with whatever that is, we have to have spiritual effort and we have to practice patience. So that's how contentment and surrender start. It starts from a place of that personal struggle. The middle of it, again, this is the higher level of this striving, is actually peace. That things are not going to be as difficult because the level of contentment with God has increased, the level of surrender with God has increased. So they will not have to practice as much patience. They will simply have peace in their hearts. They will have already a sense of surrender. And he says, even while some thoughts of annoyance and displeasure remain, and he says, in the end is happiness. The end is happiness and the absence of all of these thoughts. So peace is a good place to be at, but there's something even higher than that, and that is happiness. And there are people who they receive the divine decree of God, even difficult things, with joy, because they're not actually so focused on the difficult thing itself. They're focused on their Lord, and they have so much trust in Him, so much love for Him, so much contentment in Him that they know that whatever they are experiencing, whatever they are witnessing, is coming from Him, and it has to be good because He's good, because He's the greatest. So they kind of transcend the difficulty itself, and that is truly a high level. And even at that high level, that highest level, he says, an initial reaction that lacks this virtue is forgiven in all cases, for human nature is weak, and no human being is entirely free of this. Okay, so meaning every human being, no matter how great their faith is, will experience a moment when the affliction first occurs, they don't like it. That's normal. So with all of the spiritual effort, what we can do is minimize that, but we can't actually eradicate it completely. And that's okay. And that's actually a sign of the human condition, alhamdulillah. It shows, I would say it's a sign of God's mercy as well. So the person who has that highest level of contentment, then they have joy in their heart as destiny unfolds, right? They meet tribulations. It said they meet tribulations with a smile on their face. And that's, again, we mentioned these highest levels not to make us despair or feel bad about ourselves, but to know that continuing in striving and practicing what we can practice has relief at the end. There's reward, of course, in this life, but there's also that you keep going. It's only going to get better. Don't give up in your patience. Don't give up in striving for contentment, because the levels only increase, and as the levels increase, things actually get easier. Spiritually, they get easier. So that's, I think, a very encouraging thing for all of us. And sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bestows a person with both the tribulation and the sakina at the same time, right? They didn't do any spiritual effort in that particular test. The test hits, and the person will say, I don't know why, but I've been at peace this entire time. And that's a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and may Allah grant us all gifts like that in difficult times. But it doesn't mean that if we are not granted that gift, that there's nowhere for us to go. We're supposed to strive towards patience. And this idea that if they are tested, they are patient, well, we're rewarded without measure when it comes to patience. our reward, one of the reasons why a person may be not given the gift of sakina at the time of a great difficulty is Allah wants to give them great, great, great reward, right? He wants to elevate them. He wants to give them a higher station with Him. And so that patience is where that immense and unimaginable reward comes from. If it was easy, right, then the reward would be a lot less. So sometimes when we see that difficulty in our lives, if we see ourselves in that difficulty having to practice patience, but also in that difficulty we are returning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala more than we were before, then that's a really good sign. That is a blessing from God. That's Allah pulling you to Himself through that tribulation. He's literally taking you from where you were and just making something to be a reason for your spiritual elevation. And that's from His kindness, and that's from His love and His mercy. So one of the things also that comes to mind when it comes to things we want versus things that happen is a beautiful statement of Ali radiallahu anhu, where he said, the only time that I'm happier than getting what I asked for is when I don't get what I asked for. So he makes a dua, and we know our duas are answered in three ways. Either we get exactly what we asked for, or Allah saves our dua for the day of judgment, and He gives us on that day that dua will be used in our favor, or the dua is used to block a calamity from befalling us, or some other kind of harm from befalling us. So we don't get what we say the only time you don't get what you asked for is when you get better than what you asked for. So never stop asking, because you're going to be getting regardless. So Ali radiallahu anhu, in his supreme intellect and his understanding, he says, the only time I'm happier to not get what I asked for, or to happier than getting what I asked for, is in not getting what I asked for, because that's a clear sign of God. I didn't get what I wanted, I got what God wanted, and that's so much better. And he would find happiness and joy in that. And so this concept that someone's contentment with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can be so much that even as destiny unfolds with things that are difficult, they have joy in their hearts, again, because they believe deeply that everything that comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is khair. It's essentially good, and not just good, but it's the best. So I really want to emphasize this. As the destiny unfolds, we translate the word khair, as just good, but what it really means is best. So again, as Imam Ghazali has said, that nothing in the realm of possibility is better than what was. Okay, so it could never have been any better. Once it's happened, we know that was the best possible scenario, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not just the one who knows everything that is, right? It's not that He knows just everything that exists and that will exist. He's also the one who knows the infinite possibilities of everything that does not exist. He knows the infinite possibilities of all that is not in existence. And so for something to happen and to occur and to exist is precise decision from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And His decision is the best. It's not just good, it's the best. It's better than what I could have chosen and what you could have chosen. And so we, through our good opinion of Him, and we practice patience with things that are best, but they may be difficult. They may make us sad. They may be hard to overcome. There's a struggle involved. Maybe there's financial difficulty. Maybe there's emotional difficulty. And all of that is part of, the life of this world in terms of where we get rewarded and how we're tested. But the knowledge, finding contentment with, I am content with Allah as my Lord, and I am content with His decree. And I will strive to have the best adab with what He decrees as possible, the best manners. And I want to increase my manners. I want to always strive to be better with Him. And one of the ways that we can do this is by keeping a good opinion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ibn Ata'illah, he said, to soften for you the suffering of affliction, He has taught you that He is the one who causes trials to come upon you. For the one who confronts you with His decrees of fate is the same one who has accustomed you to husn al-ikhtiyar. He's the same one who accustomed you to His excellent and best choice. One of the ways that we grow our patience, and it's a muscle that needs exercising, is for us to be able to practice patience in the things that are easy, right? So in the acts of worship, we practice this muscle of patience. In the acts of in staying away from things that are forbidden, then we also practice this act of patience. Because of time, I have to move very quickly to the other two, which is that if they are given, they are thankful. Alhamdulillah, this is very normal for people to be grateful when they have been given a blessing. I should say it should be normal. It's actually from our fitrah to recognize that something that is there that we did not do ourselves was given to us by God. But also to know that all of our good deeds, whatever of good that we do, they're all blessings from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so to be truthful with Allah is to be grateful, to just be honest with Him. And sometimes if a difficulty is kind of a hardship makes a person lose perspective, is take whatever that hardship is that seems to like cover your face and so you can't see anything else but the hardship, and put it on a shelf, and then look around and count all your blessings. And don't forget all the blessings you have while that hardship is right there. It's not going anywhere. It's sitting on a shelf. You will get to it when the time comes. But actually, to practice gratitude through a difficulty is also something that's really significant for our faith. And then to practice gratitude in general for the things that are good. We have from this a beautiful statement of Imam Junaid. He said that gratitude is that you do not use the gifts that Allah has given you to sin against Him. So there's gratitude of the heart, which is to acknowledge and to look at the one who's, the giver, the benefactor, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to witness Him as the one who's constantly giving to you. And there's gratitude of the tongue, which is to mention your blessings and to thank Him for it. And the gratitude of the limbs is to use what we have been given in the way that Allah loves, and to be careful not to use our blessings in the way He doesn't love. So it wouldn't be grateful. It's not an act of gratitude to use your cell phone to look at things. A cell phone is an amazing piece of technology, right? It's an expensive piece of technology. There are people who cannot afford phones like this, and they cannot connect to other human beings around the world. So from gratitude that Allah has given you this piece of technology is to not use it to look at things that we shouldn't be looking at, or to waste our time as much as we can possibly not waste our time on things that would take away our time, without any benefit. And I'm not saying recreation is wrong, or watching a cartoon or whatever it is that, that's recreational, that inshallah doesn't have harm in it. But the point is we strive to use the many gifts that we have, whether it's your health or your strength or your time, in ways that are in accordance with what Allah has is pleased with. He's the one who gave it to us in the first place. And I don't remember who said this, but it's a different person in our tradition who said that a higher level is that for some people, this is the higher level of a spiritual level, is for some people, when they are tested, they are grateful. And when they are given, they're generous. They just give it away. They have ithar with everyone else. They prefer other people over themselves. So that's a really high level that some people in our tradition had. And then the last one is that when you are transgressed, to actually forgive. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that a transgression that we have from another human being, after it's occurred, is also from the divine decree. We were meant to go through that hardship. We were meant to go through that difficulty. So the person in front of us, yes, they're sinful, and in front of Allah, they will be accountable. But ultimately, Allah has decreed for us to be faced with this test, that another human being is harming us in some way. And so, especially when it comes to the light annoyances, this is like, I don't like the way this person looked at me. What did they mean when they said that? We can't be a people who get caught up in any of that. I think in those types of situations, forgiveness should be a default setting in the Muslim, where we overlook and we forgive each other and we don't hold grudges over silly things like that. That's a waste of time. It's also a sign that we're not using our time well. But for bigger things that are heavier, that are abusive, right? Now that's a situation where forgiveness is not easy. And it may not be initially, but the idea is that the highest level of ihsan is to forgive. So it's not, a person can say, okay, I'm not there yet. And they're not even required to forgive according to the law. The Sharia does not require forgiveness. But it's one of those things that if you forgive, you're the one who benefits the most. You're the one who wins the most. You're the one in this life and the next who kind of like accumulates the most through this. And it's said that the great people in our tradition in Islamic history, it wasn't that they outdid everyone else in so many acts of worship. It was actually that they were harmed by people, and they were subjects of slander. They were subjects of just all kinds of wrong things. And they had in their hearts a capacity for forgiveness and magnanimity. And so through the harm that other people were harming them, their station was elevated, because obviously that's difficult when people are backbiting or doing whatever they're doing. The person who is the subject of that and they have done no wrong, they will automatically be elevated through that. And then for that person to turn around and then forgive the people who have harmed them, that's incredible. And then again, their station is increased. So forgiveness is really, it's a spiritual aspiration, right? So, and it's something, as Mujahid says, that when they're transgressed, they forgive. It's a sign of guidance. Like you actually know what this life is about and what the next life is about. If you recognize the reality of the afterlife, then forgiveness is something that even if you're not there today or tomorrow or even a year from now, it's something you have in your heart as an intention. I want to strive to be forgiving. And our communities can benefit from this. We have, on an individual, we can benefit from this. And community level, we can benefit from this. There's cities where institutions have 20-year-old grudges. Like organizations won't work together. They won't sit in the same room and have a conversation together. 20-year-old grudges. And no one remembers what the fight was about. No one actually remembers what the problem was. Maybe a few people have a couple of stories, but the new generations have no idea what caused, like why don't we do something together? Why are we not with each other? And this is, we can overcome this. So I would say that if you look at the example of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, also the Prophet Yusuf ﷺ, in a situation where someone has been harmed, it's important that that person who's been harmed is fully removed from the harm. So they forgive from a place of being fully protected, safe, and secure. Right? They're not still in a state of being abused. So the first thing is remove the person completely from abuse. Remove the person completely from harm. They have to be totally removed. And then they have to be elevated to the point where they have the upper hand. So in Fath Mecca, for example, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ raised the largest army he had up until that point. It surrounded Mecca, and he had every right to exact revenge on the people of Mecca, who fought him and who killed his companions, and who tried to attack the city of Medina, where civilian lives were, and men, women, and children who were not part of the battlefield. They lived there. They tried to attack Medina, right? So he had every right. No one would have faulted him. No one would have faulted the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ if the certain people were killed or punished at that time. But from when he had the position of strength, what he actually did was not only forgive, but he established, because now he has the upper hand, right? So the upper hand means I have the ability to change the future in the situation. He established that city upon that which was right and good. Rather than hurt and harm, he guided them to that which was right, and he established them and made them firm on that which was good. That's what he did towards his enemies who fought him for years. The same thing happened with the Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam. They come to him, right? At this point, when he forgives them, he's the Amin, right? And he has full capacity to punish them, throw them in prison, do whatever he wants to them. And his command would have been obeyed. But instead, on that day, he forgives them, right? And what happens from that? He establishes them on good. He corrects them. And so that's possible when a person is fully removed from the situation and they have the upper hand, and then they choose that highest level, which is to forgive. Now, what about the person who's still in harm? They're still being harmed. Survival. You have to protect yourself. If you're still being harmed, you have to protect yourself from that harm. So finding a way out of that harm is the immediate thing that needs to happen. And harm is different things. So depending on what we're talking about, a harm could be that someone uses your things at your office without permission, and they get it lost. They lose your things. They lose your stapler. They lose your pens. Whatever it is, it could be something minor. It could be something very big. But when a person is in harm, something that they can do, when, especially when forgiveness does not even seem possible in that moment, is simply to make dua that Allah guides them to tawbah, that Allah guides this person, makes them aware of their errors, guides them away from inflicting this harm, prevents them from doing this harm to others. You can make dua for them to repent and to realize the error of their ways, and to realize it in such a way where they would never harm anyone else. You can be the cause of someone else's reform, even as you're being harmed by them, and by making dua for their guidance. And that doesn't mean that you stay in a state of harm. It's very important that a person removes themselves from harm always, as much as they possibly can. But you can also make dua, this person who had harmed me or is harming me, oh Allah, guide them so they can stop doing this. Guide them so they can make tawbah in this life before they die. Guide them so that other people are not harmed by them. And I want to say that accountability and forgiveness are not mutually exclusive. You can forgive someone and hold them accountable at the same time. So I know because of time we don't have time to get into this, but one of the things that Shaykh Abdul Qadir al-Jilani, he said, even if he has to carry out the had, you know, the hudud in Islamic law, they usually involve the death penalty. Okay, or they often can involve the death penalty. He said, even if I had to carry out the had, or I have to give someone the death penalty, my heart is careful to ra'i al-wud, that I'm going to be careful and watchful that I still love this person. Right now, we're talking about very high stations. But what this indicates to us is that it's like justice and mercy are not mutually exclusive. Accountability and love for someone, and love for their well-being, and love for that Allah would forgive them, and love that Allah would accept their tawbah and their repentance, they're not mutually exclusive. They can be together. And we live in a time where we think justice has to be punitive. You have to hate the person. You have to want the worst for them. That all is in one box. And then on the other side, there's another extreme, which is no accountability. Forgive them, let them do whatever they want, let them harm everyone, let them get away with everything. And that's another extreme that we're not talking about. We're actually talking about something that's together, where people are protected from harm and your heart still wills good. You're practicing a different muscle of patience now. It still wills good for the creation of God. Abu Yazid al-Bastami, he said a statement, I'll end with this. He said, I've been talking to Allah for 30 years and people think that I'm talking to them. I've been talking to Allah for 30 years and people think that I've been talking to them. So whatever comes up in the world for him, he simply sees it as different shades of God's divine decree. So the immediate cause of this world is not what provokes his behavior. His heart is so connected and centered on God that he simply responds to everything and everyone as someone who is simply responding to God and talking to God. And so that's a really high level, obviously. But in terms of wanting to start the new year with sort of refreshing the sense of guidance in our own hearts, we can do this again, inshallah, by refreshing our connection and our intention for patience, right? Our connection and our intention for gratitude, and also our connection and our intention to be forgiving and to be magnanimous, inshallah. And I don't have time to say more, so we'll stop here, inshallah. And whatever was beneficial is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whatever is wrong and mistaken is from myself and shaitan. Barakallahu fikum.